Hello my friends, welcome to the Critter Chronicles. In the last installment, we explored the world of tarantulas, and before that, angry wasps. But today, we are diving into a very different creature with a not so great reputation, the leech. As usual, I hope you're all not too squeamish. Without further ado, I also hope you like talking about blood, because we're about to get into the slimy details of the blood-sucking leech. The critters we commonly call leeches are segmented, parasitic or predatory worms that comprise the subclass Hirudinea within the phylum Annelida. For anyone who isn't a biology nerd, let's expand on that last sentence. Bear with me. These slimy parasites, along with earthworms, snails, and slugs, are not insects, even though it might seem that way to some of us. In fact, they are all in completely different phylums of animals. The two phylums we want to look at for these critters are Annelida, as I just said, and Mollusca. I'm sure many of you have heard of the term mollusk before when a clam or something similar comes up. Well, believe it or not, snails, slugs, and even squids are mollusks. And to boot, annelids, like leeches, and mollusks share more common ancestors together than they do with insecta. Isn't biology just fascinating? Okay, back to leeches. The unlovable little bloodworms themselves come in a couple different flavors. We have the predators, the scavengers, and the bloodsuckers. Yes, that's right. Contrary to popular belief, they are not all little blood-hungry vampires. Though let's be honest, a lot of them are. And those are the ones we'll be focusing on. You're welcome. Anyway, what about the term leech itself? Why do we call these little worms leeches? Well, a peruse through a dictionary will show us that the term is both a noun and a verb these days, with some meanings directly borrowing from our blood-sucking friends. For example, a person who extorts profit from or sponges on others. Yikes. Going way back though, the origin of the word seems to be the Old English word for worm. Okay, well that's a little anticlimactic, but it makes sense. Oddly enough, doctors were also referred to as leeches at a time in English history. There's a reason for this, which we will get into later, so stay tuned. In terms of habitation, leeches can be found in a wide range of environments, from freshwater ponds and rivers to damp forest floors. This is mainly due to the variety in diet and lifestyle seen throughout the subclass of Hirudinea. As a whole, members of the Annelida phylum can reproduce both sexually and asexually. However, leeches can only reproduce sexually. Pretty standard, right? Not exactly. All leeches are known as hermaphrodites, which I will explain later. In terms of how they fit into our global biosphere, while leeches are mostly seen as insufferable pests by us humans, they function as predators, prey, parasites, and vectors of parasites. That's a lot of shoes to fill. Okay, so for anyone who is more seasoned in taxonomy, you may have now realized that there are a lot of different leeches out there, since the term leech is applied liberally to an entire subclass of animals. We are talking hundreds of critters, 650 or more to be approximate. I guess we humans just got lazy with naming, huh? Anywho, for the sake of a higher quality video, we are going to focus specifically on a suborder within Hirudinea, known as Hirudiniforms. Within Hirudiniforms, you will find what we like to call the jawed leeches. These are the little expletives you'll normally find latching onto you after a swim in a sketchy lake or something like that. Unfortunately, I had a tough time finding a term for the study of leeches. So let's just say this is a deeper dive into anatomy and taxonomy. We'll start with a clearer look at taxonomy, as it is important to visualize where Hirudiniforms fit into the puzzle. To keep everyone's heads from spinning, let's start with a layman explanation of what Hirudiniforms are. These little suckers, pun count one, are often known as proboscisless leeches. For anyone who doesn't know what a proboscis is, I ask you to remember that one episode of SpongeBob where the butterfly known as Wormy lands on SpongeBob's glass helmet. Never watched SpongeBob? Well, your loss. Regardless, that little straw sticking out of Wormy's mouth parts, that is a proboscis. It's just a tube that many creatures like butterflies have for consumption, as opposed to, say, jaws and teeth. So, Hirudiniforms do not have that straw, though some leeches do. Don't get too excited though, these guys are still plenty nasty. Remember, most of the blood-sucking worms we typically think of when considering leeches are Hirudiniforms. In example, here's the taxonomy tree of one proper species from northeastern America called Macrobdella sestertia, also known as the New England medicinal leech. Bask in its glory. It is one of the rarest species of leech in the US and also the largest in the New England area. Yum. These little chunky slime sticks can measure over 5 inches long. Alright, time for some anatomy. This will cover most of Hirudinea, not just Hirudiniforms. Other than the fact, of course, that some species within Hirudinea do have proboscises. But I digress. The bodies of typical leeches come in 2 forms of worm flavor. Some are elongated and cylindrical, while others are elongated and dorso-ventrally flattened. This means most leeches are long and round like earthworms, or long and flat like a person on their stomach doing the worm. Pun count 3. Their bodies have no setae or parapodia, setae being hair or bristle-like structures, and parapodia being appendages used for movement or breathing. Typical leeches will have suckers at both the posterior and anterior end of their bodies. The anterior sucker is smaller, but contains the mouth where the magic happens. Did that sound wrong? I mean that's where they suck blood. As for the sucker on the posterior end, it's used to stick to things and get around. The length of a leech ranges from teeny weeny to about 8 inches, or even longer when the animal stretches. The body itself is broken into 34 segments known as somites. These somites are concealed by external ring-like markings called annulations. Interestingly, each segment in any given species of Hirudinea, or even Annelida as a whole, contains nervous, excretory, and circulatory system units. Just like us humans, leeches like to breathe. However, unlike us, they breathe through their skin. Their digestive system contains a crop, also known as a pouch, in which food can be stored for several months. Gnarly. Disgusting! They do have 1 to 4 pairs of little beady eyes, which are located at the anterior end. These can be hard to see, which is kind of ironic. Individual leeches are hermaphroditic, as I mentioned. This means the functional reproductive organs of both sexes occur in the same individual. Time to cover the crown jewel of many Hirudiniforms, their mouth parts. A characteristic bite from, say, a European medicinal leech will look like a 3-pronged star or a Y. This is due to the shape of their jaws and the ridge of teeth within. How wonderful. Keep in mind, some members of Hirudiniforms do not have jaws. Okay, let's get into the life cycle and survival of jawed leeches. This will include a nice discussion on how they eat. Get ready for a little bit of nightmare fuel. Also, a friendly reminder to like the video and subscribe if you're enjoying it. Thanks. Parasitology is the study of parasites and their hosts. I chose to put it in the name of this section because it sounds cool and is fitting for many species of Hirudinea. A leech's life is set to begin when a mommy and daddy leech get together and fertilize eggs. Now, which leech is mommy and which is daddy doesn't really matter, as either can do both jobs. However, leeches cannot fertilize their own eggs. The eggs are fertilized within the female organs of a leech and laid within a cocoon, which may be deposited on land or in water. After hatching, the young will often cling onto the backs of their parent until the first meal can be found. They grow independently after that. Hirudinea as a whole are epimorphic, meaning they go through growth stages without changing very drastically. A juvenile that emerges from a cocoon has the same number of segments for its entire life, unlike earthworms, which add segments as they grow. The adult life of a leech is, similar to many invertebrates, quite depressing. They mate once, maybe twice, and kick the bucket after that. Okay, maybe that makes you leech haters out there happy, but don't get too pumped up about it, because leeches may live for months or even a year prior to having babies, and can survive just as long between each feeding. Just remember though, there are leeches out there that don't suck blood at all. Instead, they prey on other critters or act as decomposers in the environments they inhabit. But let's get back onto the bloodsuckers. Individual species of jawed leeches tend to be pretty specific in their purpose, attacking either fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, or mammals. There is very little overlap here. These critters have their priorities straight as an arrow. This is, however, assuming enough food is available. Hirudiniforms can be found all over the world, mostly in bodies of fresh water or soil covered in damp vegetation. Let's go back to the species called the European medicinal leech. These critters exist from as far as Western Europe all the way to Kazakhstan. Their preferred habitat is muddy freshwater pools and ditches loaded with weeds. Sounds like a vacation spot to me. A whole genus within Hirudineiforms, known as Hemidipsa, are blood-sucking land leeches that inhabit tropical and subtropical areas around the Indian and Pacific Oceans. One more reason to go to the jungle, am I right? I could go on and on about habitats, but let's talk about how jawed leeches eat now. Once a leech latches onto a victim, it slices with its jaws and teeth and quickly secretes special saliva that anesthetizes the wound area, dilates local blood vessels, and prevents blood from clotting. From there, it gets its fill. The craziest part is the anticoagulant used by these leeches, known as Hirudin, is so powerful, a feeding might only last 30 minutes or less, but bleeding will continue for up to 10 hours or more. Oof, I think I'll pass on that one, even if it is mostly painless. There is a silver lining buried in the sauce here though, which I'll get into soon. In the case of land leeches, which normally feed on only mammals, they will wait in damp vegetation with one end sticking up in the air like some sort of vampire antenna. A victim won't even know they were bitten until they see blood running down their leg or something. As for many freshwater leeches, I think it's pretty obvious how they get stuck to humans. Swim time with leeches. Except it ain't a pool, and the leeches don't care what time it is. Why exactly do we call some of these little nightmares medicinal leeches? And why were doctors called leeches back in the day? Was it some sort of cosplay thing? No, it was even weirder than that. Time for a raise of hands. I know I can't see any of you, but let's do it anyway. Who among us has heard of the term bloodletting? This ancient procedure is as straightforward and frankly nasty as it sounds. It's an ancient method of curing the ailments of man, tracing as far back as ancient Greece or Egypt. Historians believe that originally, most doctors just thought it rid the body of impure fluids. This would in turn cure a patient of an ailment. And when I say ailment, they used this crap for almost everything back then. I think we can start to see why they called doctors leeches if they were quick to do this kind of thing. Often, it was a quack science done in ignorance, but there is actually some real use behind bloodletting. In fact, surgeons in 18th century Europe used bloodletting as a treatment for fever, hypertension, inflammation of the lungs, and pulmonary edema. Now, if you ask me, cutting my arm to make my fever go away seems a bit extreme, but hey, I guess a lack of Advil will drive people to do some pretty crazy things. How do leeches fit into this though? Well, bloodletting involves removing blood from the human body, and leeches suck blood. Yes, it really is that simple. We humans took slimy, parasitic worms and stuck them onto other people to remove blood. And guess what? We still do this. As alarming as it might sound, jawed leeches actually make many people's lives better these days. Because of the Hirudin present in their saliva, they are a great help if blood needs to be removed quickly from the human body in emergency situations. No medicine needed. An example use case is to prevent blood clots and reduce the amounts of congested blood in human tissue. Okay, so are there any risks to being bitten by a leech? Well, as you can imagine, wild leeches aren't out there taking hot, soapy showers before they bite their victims. As such, a bite by an unclean leech can become infected. Horrifyingly, leeches can even carry viruses, bacteria, or parasites. There is a definite risk to being bitten by a leech that isn't medical grade. Don't panic too much though, as there is no solidly established evidence as of now that leeches can transmit diseases through their bites. Rather, a bite will normally be infected due to it being an unclean, open wound. The risk of a leech bite doesn't end with pathogens though. Some individuals can even have allergic reactions to the bite, which might end in anaphylaxis. To understand avoidance, you must understand the nature of these creatures. Deja vu? Well, just like with ticks, wasps, and tarantulas, leeches aren't evil supervillains out to get us humans. Everything they do is for their survival. There is no good or bad to them, no right or wrong. There is just biological imperative. They will bite you if they are a species that feeds on mammals and are looking for a meal. As such, it is up to us humans to stay out of their way or face the music. So how can you stay out of the way? The best bet is to avoid where they are. Obviously, we cannot live in bubbles. But at the very least, try to avoid standing around in stagnant water or areas with damp foliage. Just like with ticks, you can avoid bites by wearing protective clothing. Anything thick and tight-fitting cannot be bitten through. In the case of leeches, this applies to both land and water. Can leeches be repelled like mosquitoes or ticks? Yes, actually. Natural substances such as oil of lemon eucalyptus can actually be used as repellent on top of your clothes as well. Unfortunately, I'm aware no one is perfect, and one day we may find a leech or a leech wound on our bodies. But what should you do if it happens to you? Well, similar to a tick, you definitely want to remove the leech without it regurgitating anything. This will take patience and care. First, locate the head and mouth, which will appear smaller and slimmer. Then, pull your skin that's under the leech taut. Finally, carefully slide a fingernail underneath the mouth and gently separate it from your skin. Don't be scared. These guys aren't quite as difficult to remove as ticks, even if they are more unnerving. Remember, ticks have barbed mouth parts that almost act like fishing hooks. Leeches do not. After the leech is removed, quickly get it away from you so it cannot reattach. Finally, clean and dress the wound with standard first aid procedures. Remember that you'll see a lot of bleeding when you remove the leech due to the hirudin present in their saliva. Don't panic though, this is expected. There really is so much more to say about leeches. After all, we mainly focused on the jawed leeches of hirudiniforms for the bulk of this video. But in the interest of keeping things manageable and understandable, I think this is a good cutoff point. As always, this video was a pleasure to make. The script was a bit tricky to put together, but I think it turned out well. If you agree and enjoyed this excursion into the Critter Chronicles, please consider liking and subscribing. Your support does mean a lot. Thanks for sticking around and learning about Hirudinea with me. I hope that maybe, after listening, your fear or hatred for these creatures, if you have any, is slightly lessened. Remember, leeches are just living creatures like us, trying to survive on this unforgiving but brilliant planet of ours. If you keep clear of them, they will do you no harm. Okay, enough philosophy. I'll see you all in the next one. Stay away from leeches, unless of course your surgeon says otherwise. Noodles NightTrain, signing off. Alright everybody, this is Noodles NightTrain of the future here. I know I just kind of capped off the video, but I have one announcement I'd like to make before we end this thing for real. I am now partnered with YouTube, and that means that I have a membership program on my channel now. If anyone wants to support me, I promise it'll be worth your while, so go check it out to see the different tiers and whatnot. Alright, we're gonna head out for real now. See you guys next time.